is a problem with the Rockefeller origin story, a problem that the official biography handles the same way it handles all inconvenient truths, moving past it quickly and filling the space with a more comfortable narrative. The problem is the gap. The gap between what the documentary record shows about the Rockefeller family before 1858 and what the record shows after 1865. That gap is not the gap between a poor family and a wealthy one, which is the story the official biography tells. No, it is the gap between a family that essentially does not exist in any meaningful financial record before a specific date, and a family that, within 1 decade of that date, controlled the most consequential industrial infrastructure in the Western world. The speed of that transition and the specific historical context in which it occurred does not fit the story of a self-made man building from nothing. It fits a different story, one that the official account of American industrial history has never seriously attempted to tell. I want to start with what the record actually shows, because the record itself is what matters, not the mythology, not the family cooperated biographies, not the university endowments or cultural institutions making the case for Rockefeller greatness since the 1890s. The record itself shows William Avery Rockefeller, the father of John D. Rockefeller, appearing as an itinerant trader and patent medicine salesman operating across upstate New York and the Midwest during the 1840s and 50s. He called himself a botanic physician, selling herbal cures and even cancer remedies from a wagon. He was documented in a warrant for the charge of rape in Cauga County, New York, in 1849. Eventually, he abandoned his family in the early 1870s, living out his remaining decades under the assumed name William Levston in South Dakota, where he died in 1906. His estate at death was negligible. This is the paternal inheritance of the man who would become the wealthiest person in history by virtually every inflation-adjusted calculation. A traveling medicine show operator charged with rape, eventually disappearing under a false name. The origin story the official biography offers is that John D. Rockefeller's wealth was the product of his own disciplined industry and commercial genius, built from modest beginnings through ruthless but legal business practices applied to the emerging oil industry of Western Pennsylvania. The modest beginnings are documented. John D. Rockefeller was born in 1839 in Richford, New York. He moved with his family to Cleveland in 1853 and found work as a clerk at a produce commission house in 1855, at the age of 16. He left that position in 1858 and, with a partner named Morez Clark, established a produce commission business of his own, using, according to the official account, $4,000 borrowed from his father and $1,000 of his own savings. $4,000 in 1858 is approximately $130,000 today. A 16-year-old clerk in a produce commission house in the 1850s earned approximately $300 to $500 per year. In 3 years, such a clerk could not have accumulated $1,000 in savings without extraordinary frugality or supplemental income from undocumented sources. The $4,000 from his father is even more difficult to account for, given William Avery Rockefeller's documented income from patent medicine sales at the same period. The produce commission business that Rockefeller and Clark established in 1858 prospered, and by 1863, they entered the oil refining business in Cleveland, establishing a partnership with a refiner named Samuel Andrews that would become, within 7 years, the Standard Oil Company. The transition from a modestly successful produce merchant to the owner of the largest oil refining operation in the United States was completed within approximately a decade and a half of the initial business formation. This is the central mystery of the Rockefeller financial record. The Standard account attributes this transition to Rockefeller's commercial genius, his systematic approach to reducing costs, his willingness to negotiate with railroads for rebates that gave Standard Oil freight advantages over competitors, and his organizational innovation in creating the trust structure that consolidated the American oil industry. All of these elements are documented, What is not documented in any satisfactory form is the source of the capital that enabled them. Building an oil refinery in 1863 required significant capital. Acquiring additional refineries in Cleveland during the early 1870s, which Rockefeller did with a speed that competitors found impossible to match, required resources the official record does not adequately account for. The railroads with whom Rockefeller negotiated his famous rebate arrangements did not do so merely because he was a skilled salesman. They did so because he was moving a volume of product that made him commercially significant, and moving that volume required capital that the official record cannot fully explain. The congressional investigation of 1872, which examined the South Improvement Company, predecessor to the Standard Oil Trust, documented the scale of what Rockefeller had built with a clarity that even committee members found difficult to account for. Several experienced businessmen on the committee expressed puzzlement at the speed with which a Cleveland-produced merchant had acquired the capital and the railroad relationships to construct what was already the most powerful commercial arrangement in the American oil industry. The official biography explains this by Rockefeller's disciplined reinvestment of profits. Every dollar earned was reinvested rather than consumed, compounding the growth of the enterprise. In principle, this explanation is plausible, and it is the one Rockefeller himself consistently offered in his memoirs and interviews. But it is not adequate to account for the specific timeline and scale that the record shows. The capital that established Standard Oil's dominance from 1870 to 1879, when the trust structure was formally established, had to come from somewhere. The official biography's "somewhere" is insufficient by the arithmetic of documented income sources in the relevant period. The alternative, which has been pointed to by some researchers, is the period between 1858 and 1865, and the specific conditions of the American economy in that window. That window is the Civil War. The Civil War was not merely a military conflict. It was the largest single redistribution of economic resources in American history, to that point, producing winners and losers at unprecedented speed and scale, through mechanisms that the official history documents only selectively. The produce commission business prospered at a rate that Cleveland merchants found extraordinary, a rate that surviving business records do not fully explain by reference to the volume of legitimate trade alone. Cleveland was a significant distribution point for agricultural produce moving east, and the Civil War created unusual demand for foodstuffs in quantities that could make a well-positioned produce merchant wealthy. What the official account does not examine seriously is the nature of government contracting relationships maintained by the most successful Cleveland merchants during the Civil War, and whether Rockefeller and Clark were among the contractors supplying the Union Army in ways that would have produced capital at rates far exceeding what legitimate trade could generate. Government contracting in the Civil War was notoriously corrupt and profitable, with documented patterns of overcharging, phantom deliveries, and kickback arrangements between supply contractors and military purchasing officers. The Rockefeller and Clark Partnership's contract records from the Civil War period are not fully accessible in public archives. The Rockefeller Family Archives in Sleepy Hollow, New York, contain extensive documentation of Rockefeller's business activities from the mid-1860s onward. But documentation from 1858 to 1864 is sparse. This sparseness may reflect the record-keeping practices of a young business, or what was available to be preserved, curated, and made accessible by an institution that has spent a century managing the historical record of one of America's most powerful families. The question of what the Rockefeller Archive Center has chosen to make accessible and what it has chosen to restrict is not paranoid. It is a question about institutional practice that applies to every family and corporate archive. Archives curated by the subjects of that archival record are inherently selective. The Rockefeller Archive Center is a sophisticated scholarly institution that has supported important historical research. It is also governed by Rockefeller family interests. The histories written with its cooperation are not fabrications. They are necessarily histories written from a selection of the available record. The selection missing from the official account is the selection that would answer the capital question. Where did the money come from that established Standard Oil's dominance from 1860 to 1875? The official answer is insufficient. The alternative is that the capital came from sources connected to the Civil War and its aftermath, from government contracts, from the redistribution of resources during the war and Reconstruction, from connections to the financial network simultaneously establishing itself in New York. The documentary record gestures at this without making it explicit. Some research frameworks, like Tartaria, offer more radical alternatives, but even without accepting their broader claims, the questions they raise are legitimate. The emergence of enormous fortunes across multiple industrial sectors in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. The Rockefeller oil fortune, the Carnegie steel fortune, the Morgan banking fortune, the Vanderbilt railroad fortune did not occur naturally. These fortunes appear in the record within a specific and limited time window, representing not just commercial genius, but the redistribution and redeployment of a pre-existing stock of wealth and infrastructure, not created by those who came to control it. In the Rockefeller case, the speed of rise, the scale of capital deployment within years of entering the oil industry, the existing relationships with railroads and banks by the early 1870s, and the political navigation that suggests familiarity with power structures that a Cleveland-produced merchant, encountering them for the first time, would not have possessed. All these are anomalies. Conventional analysis attributes them to luck, vision, and the opportunity of the American oil industry. Alternative frameworks propose inheritance of a different kind, not from William Avery Rockefeller, the patent medicine salesman, but from access to resources and networks connected to a pre-existing order being reorganized in the 1850s and 60s. The traction of this explanation comes from the pattern of American institutional life in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, the period immediately before the great industrial fortunes appear. Public buildings, government structures, financial institutions, and civic architecture show anomalies. Too large, too precisely constructed, and too inexpensive by the documented record to have been built from scratch using contemporary technology and labor markets. Standard Oil's headquarters and the infrastructure it depended on, the railroad network, the banking system, and government institutions, were themselves embedded in a physical and financial infrastructure that may have been inherited rather than constructed. The railroad system, by the late 1860s, was the most extensive in the world, built from essentially nothing in the 1830s to a continent-spanning network within 3 decades. Engineering techniques, gradient management, bridge construction, mountain tunneling appear advanced beyond the documented state of American engineering science for the period. While mainstream historians dispute claims of inherited technical knowledge, the question remains: was the context in which American industrial fortunes emerged itself a product of prior development being reorganized rather than built from scratch? The specific period from 1855 to 1865 produces the most concentrated anomaly in the American financial record. Industrial fortunes that would define the next century of economic life emerged with speed, coordination, and scale, suggesting mobilization of pre-existing resources rather than accumulation from commercial activity alone. Rockefeller entered oil in 1863. Carnegie accumulated capital in Pittsburgh's railroads and telegraphs since the 1850s and began Carnegie Steel in the early 1870s. J.P. Morgan began his banking career in New York in 1857, establishing relationships that made both Carnegie Steel and Rockefeller Oil possible. Vanderbilt pivoted from steamships to railroad consolidation in the 1860s with speed and success, exceeding what his documented capital could have funded without external sources. These are not merely stories of great men seizing industrial opportunity. They are patterns of coordinated economic reordering, producing a structure of industrial and financial control persisting for over a century. The coordination is not explicitly documented. Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, and Vanderbilt did not meet to divide the economy, but their sector-specific activities, supportive interests, and political connections suggest a coordination that conventional records attribute to coincidence. The Rockefeller philanthropic apparatus, accelerating after Rockefeller's retirement in 1911, is itself data on how the origins of these fortunes were managed in the historical record. Foundations, endowments, medical research, and the historical scholarship documenting American industrial capitalism were shaped by funding aligned with Rockefeller interests. Scholars focused on Standard Oil's mature operation, leaving pre-1858 capital sources, Civil War contracting, and early railroad arrangements largely unexamined. The Tarbell investigation documented Standard Oil's monopoly mechanisms, rebates, predatory pricing, railroad pressure, espionage, political corruption, but not the origin of the capital that enabled them. The pre-1860 Rockefeller record contains William Avery Rockefeller's patent medicine business, family movements, John D. Rockefeller's education, employment, and early savings, but nothing coherently linking these modest beginnings to the capital deployed starting in 1863. The connection is assumed, bridged by genius and reinvested profits, but the arithmetic does not support it. The archives are incomplete for this crucial period. Cleveland city directories, congressional records from Civil War contracting investigations, and early railroad freight records remain largely unexamined with respect to the capital question. The buildings, infrastructure, and corporate foundations are still there. The gap is still there. The arithmetic is still there. What is missing is the will to ask the question the arithmetic demands, without pre-commitment to the official conclusion. The Rockefeller family had no recorded wealth before 1858. Then, within years, they owned everything. The official narrative's bridge genius and reinvested profits simply does not bear the weight of the documented timeline. Comment, like, and subscribe if this story makes you question the origins of American industrial power. And let's continue exploring history through its real, often hidden record.